We're live again, fourth time in the last couple hours. The news does not stop. I'm back with Mitch, Dino MC. Mitch, we got breaking news for the fourth time tonight that we are getting on here to cover. The Seahawks are trading DK Metcalf to the Steelers for pick 52 and then signing him to a 5-year extension, which definitely makes him one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL. Initial reactions when you saw this, it broke right after the Devontae Adams news, right after the Josh Allen news, which we're probably not going to do a video on. But yeah, man, what do you think? Another non-elite but very good receiver going to a place that nobody's excited at all about their offense, or they have no clue who their quarterback's going to be. So what do you think?
Exactly. I mean, you could talk yourself in about every breaking news video we've had so far. You could talk yourself into like even Ertz being a thing, or Geno Smith, or Devontae Adams, Gesicki. You could like give yourself a pretty good narrative there, right? With DK Metcalf, as far as Dynasty goes, going to Pittsburgh, it's one of those things to where I'm having a hard time. Is he the wide receiver one over Pickens? Probably, but what's that target share wise? Every single year since 2021, his target share has dropped. And we always say targets are a stat you earn. Well, if it keeps dropping, that means the Seahawks were happy throwing to other guys. Now, maybe he's going to go in there and the case will be made, hey, he's getting paid. He's going to be their number one guy. But like you alluded to, they don't have a quarterback. And they've already said they want to either bring back Justin Fields or Russ. Neither of those guys make me feel great about supporting two fantasy options on a team that ran the third fewest as far as passing rate goes in the NFL last year.
Well, let's start there. Pickens or Metcalf? You got to feel better about Metcalf given he's been better than Pickens, and essentially this could mean that, you know, this probably impacts Higgins' deal, but it probably impacts Pickens' deal. Like, he's probably looking at DK going, I'm a younger version of him, and look what you just paid him, and I was the one that's already in-house. Do you think this impacts the future of Pickens, and who would you prefer, Pickens or DK? For that reason, I mean, Pickens could be out of town, Mitch, to a better spot than Pittsburgh. So how would you play this? Just one versus the other?
Yeah, I would definitely take Metcalf over Pickens, especially just with the things we see on the sidelines as Pickens. I mean, Metcalf hasn't been perfect off the field, but like he at least isn't doing the stuff that Pickens does, like afterwards, team meetings, all of that stuff. For me, I'm going to go Metcalf, but you are talking about Metcalf being pretty much wide receiver 23, wide receiver 24, so a top 24 wide receiver in Dynasty rankings. We're comparing him to a guy that's wide receiver 30, but he might as well be wide receiver 40 because there's no difference there. Like, difference between a wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4, there's nothing there in Dynasty. I mean, it's just, who do you feel like buying into, Xavier Worthy or Brandon Ayuk? Every 50% of people going to go one way, 50% of people is going to go the other way. And if that's kind of the class that Metcalf is in, like, I know there's a lot of Steelers fans out there who are probably really happy, hey, we're getting this really good wide receiver one. But as far as it goes in Dynasty and not just NFL wise, I have a hard time. If I'm in a startup draft, I don't think I'm selecting DK Metcalf anywhere around wide receiver 24.
And here's the Pittsburgh Trinity from last year. So obviously you have Pickens' usage was just through the roof. And then you have Freiermuth next up. And then pretty much everybody else down here. You have Calvin Austin up here for the season, which is, you know, typical for a team's wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 to kind of hover in this range. But one big takeaway from looking at this, which is the biggest concern for these two players. What do you notice on this chart, Mitch? What do you notice when you look at this chart? I mean, you got the usage. You got usage out here for Pickens. So he's getting
great. Usage is great.
All of the stuff in the offense that could lead to points. What I notice here is every single one of these players is below expectation based on their usage. Meaning, without even knowing, I would tell you, looking at this graph, whoever their quarterback was sucks. Whatever offense they're running isn't producing fantasy points. And we already know that to be true. And that's where I struggle, because then I'll flip over to Pickens versus Metcalf. And again, you cannot compare these two to each other because obviously Seattle's offensive environment is totally different than the Steelers. But let's just assume that a player, for the most part, just like we would say a player earns their target share, they earn their usage to a degree too, right? Like the things they can do earns their usage in terms of target share, air yards, that kind of stuff. They earn their own yak by their ability. So largely what we put into Trinity is what a player is earning. So let's just assume you just take another Pickens and put him in this offense. How does it get better for either one? Like, hot take. Do they even have one? Assuming both of these guys stay healthy, do they even have a single receiver that finishes in the top 24 points per game?
Points per game wise, that's what I was just going to say. No. I mean, over the course of the season, will one? Probably. But for what we care about, points per game wise in our starting lineup, no, I don't think so.
So if you tell me we're going to have two receivers that I think probably based on their usage, because again, if you trust this usage, you have to figure DK is going to slot in and do a lot of the same stuff he was doing, even though the Pittsburgh offense has a guy like Pickens. What do you do? Someone asked in the chat, how do I get out of DK? But let's assume, and it's going to be very interesting, Mitch, because Pickens was a second-round pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have a fifth-year option. He's a free agent after a year. This is going to be a very interesting situation to watch, because if I'm Pickens, I'm sitting here going, wait a second. DK's getting paid. Higgins about to get paid. Godwin's going to get paid. Devontae Adams just got paid. Like, I'm young. I probably want to either hit the market or give me DK's contract. You know what I mean? So, like, is he going to be a problem child this year to where immediately just he gets alphaed by Metcalf and now he's a problem? Like, what would you be doing with Pickens? Are you a little scared that it could be very volatile? He does not feel like the kind of guy, if they try to franchise tag him, he's just going to go with it. You know what I mean? Like, is it volatile on Pickens? Would you just get out of him now, given that, or what?
So. I think so, but the nice thing about Pickens is there has always been a dynasty market for him the second he was drafted. There are people who just love George Pickens. So I think this is actually a chance where people will even stand more firm on their take, and they're going to be like, no, George Pickens is going to still be the alpha. I definitely think there's going to be one or two managers in your leagues that do that. Now, like, what do you do with the DK Metcalf? The issue for me is I would recommend don't try to trade him for a rookie pick, because getting a good first that you like is going to be hard. So you're probably going to get early seconds in value. I would attack a different prospect or a different NFL player that you like a little bit more that could be depreciated. Like right now, Brandon Ayuk, right? Nobody really likes him. But they did just move off Debo. Some people like Ricky Pearsall. I'm not a huge Brandon Ayuk fan, but I could definitely tell a story a lot easier. Brandon Ayuk can be a top 24 wide receiver more so than I can with DK Metcalf right now. So I think looking for that kind of receiver, Chris Olave would be another one. I'm personally out on him because of his health issues. But there's going to be other people that are willing to move him or move off him. So I really like attacking those players with a guy like DK Metcalf.
So we just did the Devontae Adams video. Mm-hmm. George Pickens or Devontae Adams?
Man,
you're giving up the hopium of what Pickens could be, but you're also feeling like you're washing your hands clean of any sort of volatility, and you're just locking in a guy who you know is probably going to produce for at least a year.
Exactly. And Dynasty, you could put yourself on that value train as much as you want. At the end of the day, I still want to win the vast majority of my leagues. So I will go Devontae Adams.
And we got your co-host, JB, who's a Steelers fan. So I'd be curious on his thoughts on this. Forget about the quarterback. I don't personally think there's anything they can do at quarterback that's going to make me go, man, this offensive passing environment is going to be great. Even if it's Darnold. Yeah. That would be like the best case scenario. And I'm not sure he's capable of stepping into an Arthur Smith offense and just absolutely smashing 3 passing weapons in the offense. But let me ask you this, Mitch. What do we do? Because it's the Steelers. Mm-hmm. What do we do if they then turn around and draft a Mecca Ibuka in the first? Because they've done this before, where they've drafted a receiver because they have one of them they're about to ship out of town, a.k.a. Pickens, but if he's still on the roster, like what if they do draft a receiver in the first 2 rounds? Are you going to be completely out on that guy or what?
I think so. I mean, I think the only saving grace we could kind of look at now would maybe be an Aaron Rodgers. Because we did see it was with a different offensive coordinator, but we did see Mike Tomlin at the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career be willing to throw 650 times in a year.
And he will not do that with Russ, even though Russ is getting old. Yeah. That's not something I could see Russ going down with the ship playing that way. But Rodgers, I could see Rodgers doing that.
The hard thing is Arthur Smith. How much does he play into they're just going to run the ball 58% of the times, and doesn't matter who the quarterback is, you get to throw it, 24 times a game, and that's what you get.
Well, they also don't have a running back either.
Yeah.
So they don't currently have a running back where they can run it as much as they did. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Steelers do with their first couple rounds of their picks. Do they go with an early receiver or an early weapon, or do they go with a running back? Because I think that could shape what type of offense they're going to run. But this is a fascinating one because I do think if I'm sitting, and I don't want to hit this too hard because we've already hit it, but if I'm sitting at home right now and I'm George Pickens, they just traded for a receiver that is basically a owner version of me and gave him the contract that I would have wanted, and I'm sitting right there.
Yep.
And I'm maybe I'm wrong, and I see JB in the chat. We have a couple other Steelers fans in our community as well. Will they turn around and give Pickens this exact same deal? Will they be willing to pay 2 receivers with how they run their offense this type of contract? Because if not, then I'm sitting here with Pickens going like, he's going to have to feel a certain way. You know what I mean?
No,
it's like you were applying for a job. They bring in somebody outside the company and promote them ahead of you and say, here, you're under them, even though you're the one that's been there, been waiting for this. And boom. So I think it's going to be a volatile offseason for Pickens. Maybe he gets extended, maybe he doesn't. But if he doesn't, man, it feels like you have a really and in turn, if he makes waves, Mitch, people are going to view DK as he's the alpha. DK is going to smash, and then that's where you probably have your sell opportunity for DK. All right, final thoughts, or are we done?
I think my biggest point with this is right now I cannot buy into either of these players, but you raise a good point with Pickens.
You like this?
I was just going to say, what happens when
too.
Pickens gets moved? If Pickens gets moved, then all of a sudden, DK, even in Arthur Smith offense, we're buying into that. And then Pickens with May. This is tough. This is when you're going to kind of have to figure out how you feel about these 2 players. I still don't love Pickens, the issues that he has off the field. Even if he goes, I love Drake May, goes the Patriots, I'm still not going to be huge on Pickens. I'm just... it's not the kind of guy I like. If
Pickens got traded to the Patriots tomorrow, his value would go through
without a doubt.
Roof. People would be going, he's finally a top 12 receiver. He's better than all the guys that have already had more opportunity than him that haven't produced like that. That is the reason that you kind of might even buy a little George Pickens.
Yeah.
And you're just hoping that he makes so many waves that they get rid of him. Because that's where you would see the profit. If you had him laying around, it would be he goes somewhere else and gets literally the same type of deal that DK just got with the Steelers. So with that, more breaking news coming, I'm sure, in the next 24, 48 hours. Tap into everything, ddfantasyfootball.com. A lot of these discussions are also going on inside our community. Mitch, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you on the next one. Appreciate it, everybody.